Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Williamson County Board of Commissioners and the City of Marion Council meeting. It is Friday, September 29th, 2023. It's 1:01 p.m. Roll call for the county, please.
Tim Atkinson.
Present.
Jim Marlowe.
Present.
Jim Razor.
Present.
Mayor, would you need to do a roll call?
We do. On behalf of the city, thanks for hosting us today. Clerk, call the roll.
Okay, Commissioner Patton is absent. Commissioner Barwick.
Here.
Commissioner Webb.
Here.
Commissioner Stetler.
Here.
Mayor Absher.
Mayor, would you like to lead us off on the purpose of this meeting today?
Sure. So I guess, goal is to determine whether there's enough will between the two bodies to work together to form a public-private partnership. I will refer to it as P3 from now on because it trips me up when I say all three of those big words together. Kind of run through, I've given each of you an outline, at least on my thoughts, and which is not exhaustive by any stretch on what that might look like. I talked to the council about this on our meeting Monday night. We've had some conversations individually with some of the commissioners on the county as far as this, but we've got to get into some details on what that would look like and see if it makes sense for both bodies. It's necessary, frankly, for both this project of this scale, which is some multimodal sports fields out by the mall, including an indoor dome with the intention of bringing lots of travel teams, sports tourism thing, which is going on elsewhere in very successful models all over the country. So project itself contemplates a $35 million build out for those fields and all the parking lot and bathrooms and things that go along with it. And just to be blunt, I think it can be afforded by the city on its own, probably not by the county on its own. And so that's the question, is do we want to pool resources and do this? And does it make any sense from a financial standpoint to do so? In other words, what's in it for the taxpayers? So that's the project. You want me to just keep running through the outline, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, you.
We've never done a joint meeting before, so it's a little awkward. We're not exactly sure how.
Yeah, first time in history.
Is it?
Okay. Yes.
And before you go, I guess, and we drag ourselves into the weeds, maybe unnecessarily today, what level of agreement are you looking for? Do we need to be hashing down to the finest detail?
No. I think basically that would be item 6, would be if we get there, so to speak, is that to ask your council and our city attorney to work on a black letter agreement on what that would look like. The financial model of this has been iterated on several times as more information has come through on it. My main concern on that regard, and again, I know you said don't get into the weeds, and we don't need to, because frankly, I'm not entirely prepared to, is the sustainability aspect of the operation from a capital expenditure standpoint as things wear out and break. So that's got to be refined a little bit more and shared with all of you, which I'm close to, but and could in theory get into it today, but just not 100% comfortable with that. So I think if we can parking lot the finer tuned math of that for the moment, is there enough will, should the math prove out that it's sustainable and we can pay for it with the contributions that we've contemplated talking about, that we want to move towards the, be honest, to pay attorneys to start drafting some language that then would have to circulate, everybody review, talk about, negotiate potentially, and all that kind of stuff. So concurrently with that would also have to be an agreement with the private partner of this, which is Cabinet's, on what their responsibilities and are. So that's these items, really 5 and 6, I guess. 5 is the intergovernmental agreement that would have to be worked on. And the P3, your public-private partnership agreement. 6.
So the city, you had this at your last meeting, the city is on board, the city is.
Well, we're on board to having this meeting. I mean,
On board
that's
to
as far
having
as
this
we got, to be honest with you. So if you want to discuss it more, we better out. So
Well, I believe the county board, if I'm not correct me, but I believe we're here, we're ready to listen, we're ready to talk.
Okay.
So far, nothing that we've seen has scared us off yet.
Okay. So with your permission, let me
Yes.
just drive through this outline for
Absolutely.
you guys, but you've got a copy of it for everybody else that's here that doesn't. So we did have a meeting, as I talked to the council about on Monday. We had a meeting Tuesday with USDA, which has a community facilities loan program that could potentially fund this. And the concept is that we borrow that money from them. The interest rate is in the neighborhood of what I thought it would be, although that is subject to change, obviously, but not radically so is what we learned, even in this rising interest rate environment. So I think we're in the part of the punch, we're in the ballpark there. That was on Monday night, that was still a concern. So building the fields is just, that's the, believe it or not, that's the easier part of the equation. The contemplation is that the city would contribute some money, the developer would contribute some money, or the private partner as defined here, and the county would contribute some money, all into a fund that I think makes sense off some preliminary discussions for the city to actually house, because of the debt service may potentially be serviced by the debt or by the city itself. City would be the borrower, not the county. Rely upon your contribution to service the debt. And then the debt service is only part of it, and a substantial amount of funds goes into, for lack of a better term, on a capital improvement fund that would reserve for, earn interest on the known and unknown capital improvements that would be necessary inevitably over time. So the major pieces of that I've mentioned before, there's more to it than this. But the turf, these are all artificial turf fields as proposed, and apparently that's a big deal in this world, so that the playability is, the season's elongated and such. And they're expensive to replace, and that was my concern at the very outset of this, is that we were able to preserve enough money so that at year 12, 13, or whatever the lifespan of those fields, there would be enough money in this capital improvement fund, reserve fund, to pay for those and any other things, so that whoever succeeds us on these boards doesn't have a gotcha or a surprise at some point, or the thing has a risk of not being viable because the fields are. So that's hard to describe without showing math, but think of that as two different buckets: a debt service fund and a capital improvement fund that is overseen and audited by the city and used to keep this thing sustainable. So importantly, I've said this before, as I don't believe government is necessarily good or should be good in the business of running a business. And so that's critical in this part, is the private partner has the risk and is responsible for all the operational startup fees, the working capital requirements, ongoing routine maintenance, utilities, et cetera, all the complex. In this proposal to you, in addition to the $2 million that the private partner will be contributing to that fund, they would also be deeding approximately, this is an approximation, 63 plus or minus acres, and a building that they built that was on that acreage that would be integrated into the sports complex, which has a value of about $3.9 million. Private partner's investment is about almost $6 million into this from the get-go. So moving on to item number 2, again, we would establish at least 2 funds on the city's books, as I described, a debt service fund and a capital improvement fund under the sports tourism heading. Because the city has greater borrowing power, I think, than the county, is my
That's fair to
understanding
say.
anyway. That's why I think it is necessary that this is housed at the city. We're doing borrowing, therefore have to service the debt. I would see, like I said, USDA has a community facilities loan program that could loan us 100% of the funds. We have had preliminary talks with them about interest rate, the loan term, and the application process. We do feel like we can borrow for 25 years, which would contemplate at least 1 turf replacement, possibly 2, and other capital maintenance during that period. As I told the council Monday night and reiterating today and to you, the interest rate as of this moment is 3.625. It's been as high as 4. It changes quarterly, and that rate unfortunately isn't predictable because it's not tied to anything like prime rate or anything like that. They basically set that internal account every setting. He hasn't seen it move more than 0.25% of the time. But if we were all in agreement today and had the agreements all drafted today and approved, it would still take 4 months probably before we could get a loan commitment. We won't again what that term of interest rate would be. So there is a variability there on the interest rate. Item 3 got listed as the pay force. So how is this pay force? So conceptually, it requires a certain amount from the county and a certain amount from the hotel occupation tax of the county. There's some work that would need to happen on both bodies' parts in terms of ordinances reworked. The city would, so the hotel occupation tax, as I understand it, is capped statutorily at 5%.
Yes.
Currently, and I guess that agreement has changed over the years, having to do with the pavilion and some things that's ancient history when the county bought the, or the city bought the pavilion. And that 5% can't be exceeded no matter how that's split with the county. So currently, the county gets 2%, the city has a 3% occupation tax. The city also has a use tax on top of that, which is another 6%. So in order for the county to be able to increase their revenue on the hotel tax portion, and incidentally, the hotel operators are the number 1 beneficiary of an effort like this. And the city would need to change our ordinance and reduce our tax from 3% to 0. Add our 3% on the other side so that our revenues have steady. And then that would free up what would in effect be a 3% increase in the hotel tax rate that the county would then levy. And that portion or that to you, new revenue would be dedicated toward this project or a portion of it to this project. And the city would contribute out of our existing hotel tax revenues, $1.25 million, 1.25. And like I said, the private partner in the first 2 years is cash both year 1 and 2. So those inflows is what makes up the division between the debt service fund, which pays the payment, which is the easy part, and then the reserve for turf replacement, the stuff that breaks, the electronics, the message board, sealing asphalt is something that I hadn't thought of, or I didn't have a number on it, now do. For example, in parking lots, those are all real things, and they have to be kind of counted on, or you're going to get caught by surprise. So I've got a decent feel for all of that as best as can be projected from the SFA, who is the feasibility consultant on this, that I asked and pushed to give me some figures on it. And I believe that math all works. It works pretty well, actually. So there are inevitably things that are assumptions in all of those projections. Projecting something out for next year is hard. Projecting something out for 25 years is infinitely harder. But for example, in the assumptions and the math that I'll be able to share with all of you, if I can have a little bit more time to refine it, is, obviously the tax that's generated is the numerator of that is the hotel rate itself. So I'm assuming, for example, 1.5% inflation over that 25 years each year on the hotel rate. It would be ridiculous to assume that it doesn't go up. It would also be just as ridiculous to overshoot that and think that it's going to be what we've been experiencing lately. It's all going to keep going up to 7%. So I tried to use a very, very conservative 1.5%. In other words, if a hotel room average is $100 now, in the next year it'll be $101.50. But that's a variable. No matter who does all that projections, you're going to have that kind of variable. What we can get, okay, so when we have money and we obviously service the debt, there's money left over for this capital improvement fund, trying to account for all the known inputs that I just went through that will be expended over the years. We get to earn interest on that money as it sits there. And that's a big part of it. Right now is the upside of having high interest rates on the borrowing side is that you've got large deposit rates right now. What that looks like 3 years from now, or 5 years, or 25 years from now, I don't know. For example, I plugged in a 4% rate as an assumption. That makes a huge difference on this pro forma. But right now we can get 5.25 as sitting in 2-year treasuries. So I feel like that's at least in today's world. So I'm just saying all that is to say that no matter how refined the math is, it's still a projection. And there can be no certainties with what those things look like. When you do your best work and hope that that is a reasonable expectation of the future. So that's kind of how the math worked out. So we want to talk about that anymore, just high level without, I've got a spreadsheet that'll make your eyes blurry. So I'm just telling you, this is probably not the form. I don't even know how to explain, honestly. So, but we can talk about that.
Jim, you need more information on that right now?
I'll just say I appreciate the offer from the city on restructuring the hotel tax. Because quite honestly, from the spreadsheets that I've worked on this as well and been blurry, without that, we probably wouldn't even be in this.
No, I won't.
It's so critical to getting the county close to what we're talking about. Just want to make sure before we get into numbers that we appreciate, certainly I appreciate that offer, because I think that makes this a whole lot easier.
Thank you. And one of the reasons that I'm not ready to present, just fire off a spreadsheet to you guys and look. First of all, nobody else can read it right now because it's my brain labeled right and that kind of thing. But one of the things I'm trying to figure out to help the county is, you've kind of got we talked about a hard money, what I'm calling hard money commitment plus this 3%. And I know that over time you want to relieve that part. And so I think that's what I'm trying to get my head around as the hotel, this whole feasibility study indicates by year 5, there's 84,705 additional hotel space, and that drives all of this.
Yeah.
So as that 3% scales up over time, I'm hoping that we don't need all of it. We're going to need some of it, but then that can relieve your hard money commitment so that those are more discretionary funds, if I understand right, you could use for different purposes, on something
Right,
else, somewhere else.
Hotel tax, that's restricted use.
Right.
General fund.
Yeah, so please stand assured that I think I understand what the county's goal is there. I've just got to make the math work and make sure again that the whole project is still viable. But I think I understand through some conversations that your concern maybe is there.
And for the taxpayer, I think it's important to include the taxpayer in this. The understanding that this is the definition of outside money. We're talking about funding coming from hotel stays. That's people that have come from outside of Williamson County in, and by definition is just what we're looking for projects.
Well, no one likes taxes, and I don't either. However, I've used this phrase before, I hope it's not offensive to anybody, not in a religious sense, of course, but in economic development, the holy grail, so to speak, of that is to get outside money to pay for your stuff. And so that's kind of what you're speaking to, is this is all being paid in theory by people that are coming to here to stay here for the ball tournaments themselves. So I think I agree with your statement on that part. So, speaking of protecting from the taxpayer standpoint, since you brought that up, you can see item 4 there. In the Star Bonds agreements that we have, and of course, as you're well aware, the master developer of the Star Bonds district is one of the same parties that would be our private partner in this P3 arrangement. There is a very good, well-defined procurement policy outlined in that document that is maybe to a fault, but it is a very good, there's no circumstance we're borrowing $35 million a hand. So everything has to be checked and balanced before the fund is disbursed. Attorneys have to check off. In the case of Star Bond, the Star Bond administrator, which is Cody Moak, has to check off on it. I have to sign off on it. And so it does go through, good, bad, or indifferent, the apparatus of government to make sure that those funds are being expended for the proper purpose and in the proper way. So it's pretty rigorous. And I know you haven't seen it, but I would serve that language up and let you review that. That would be part of our agreements that we would craft so we can understand that. So on to the intergovernmental agreement to provide further checks and balances. I think just agreeing verbally, or even if it's a document to commit money, I think that needs to be codified in the intergovernmental agreement as authorized by statute. It would spell out every term that we can think of in it. Here's the ones that I thought of thus far. Obviously define the monetary commitment and the mechanism of that for the 25-year period. And incidentally, it's my hope this can be paid off a little sooner than 25 years. But again, it's all due to variable math, but I hope future people in government have the opportunity to pay it off early. Second point is to define that the city has the fiduciary responsibility. That is not a trite responsibility to take on, by the way. What that means is that we are required to offer those funds, our other funds, on an annual basis. That adds additional expense to the city, time, and it's not insubstantial. Like I said, the fund will be audited annually through that formal audit process, and this intergovernmental agreement should dictate and define that those reports, of course, they're public reports anyway, we need to proactively share that with the county. So understand both the debt service fund has been and the capital improvement fund. Now, on this capital, the thing that's given me the most heartburn of anything, this comes from my business side of life, is I've always been taught that your greatest liability was the one that's not listed on your balance sheet, the one you don't know about. And so in that sense, I'm trying to think of what do we do in the circumstance where inevitably, no matter how much effort is put into, okay, you need to replace the turf, we got to reseal the asphalt. Sure, somebody's going to knock down a light standard at some point that has to be all that jazz. We define all that, we try to put that math in there, make sure we've got enough cash reserves to pay for it, which has been the goal from the outset. What do we do in the circumstance if something else comes? And so, a deal of thought, again, these are just suggestions, certainly they have to be this way, but for anything that is not, any expense that's not outlined in the agreement, I would propose that the chairman of the county board and the mayor, whoever those may be, at the time when we determine this agreement, would be presented from the private partner with a request for something that needed to be replaced or done that wasn't obvious in our agreement. If the two officials agree on that, we would both sign a special warrant that we would create and have as part of our intergovernmental agreement that would authorize the city treasurer to make a disbursement from the capital improvement fund. If one of the two parties don't agree, as the city is the fiduciary, I think that request ought to go to the full city council and either by up or down the door to vote, determine whether that is paid or not. And I guess if the city council turns it down, I guess we're just done. That's my best effort at coming up with something that, and I wouldn't get too hung up on this part, although I think some thought needs to be given to it, but this really is the outlier situation. I'm just trying to anticipate, okay, what do you do when it just wasn't thought of? And so that's my suggestion. Item 4 on that, we do need to outline not only in our intergovernmental agreement, but in the private partner agreement. Again, 2 separate documents. What is the process for voiding or terminating a contract with that private partner? And the process for finding a new operator. There are a lot of people that you can hire that will run a facility like this. Not very many of them with $6 million up to run it. But that being said, what if what if Rodney dies? What if Rodney goes bankrupt? What if Rodney starts holding? And I say Rodney, I mean it's not just Rodney. You guys know that. If the apparatus stops working to the benefit of the taxpayer and puts that facility at risk, we need to be able to have triggers that we say sign on and hire somebody else. Okay? Conversely to that, let's say it works well for 25 years. We talked about this in the beginning. Particularly as you're contemplating reserving money for a second turf replacement in 25 years. Which I've got all that in this spreadsheet, but who knows what the world looks like in 25 years? And maybe all these sports that are so popular and everybody's spending money traveling and playing sports, maybe it's no longer popular. Maybe everybody stays indoors at that point in 2048. And, maybe the county and the city leaders at that time decide not to continue to support this, even though the debt's paid. Because it takes you. You're still going to have maintenance. You're still going to have some stuff. So what if it just stops at that point? It's paid off. I think we need to outline the process that, and the contract terminates, and it's all in good standing. We haven't fired the private partner. I'm pretty sure that the private partner is going to want his land back at that point. Sports fields. I don't know what that looks like or what the legal mechanisms of that are. That's way out of my wheelhouse, but I think that needs to be determined in this agreement. The process itself for creating the intergovernmental agreement, my suggestion was the city attorney, the mayor, the county attorney, and the chairman work together on terms in both to present, and then we would need another joint meeting. Obviously, we all see that stuff ahead of time and gather our thoughts and that kind of thing, but then I think we need to hash that out in another joint meeting and see if we have agreement or further modify it or whatever. And then on the public-private partnership agreement, P3, very similar, the city attorney and county council work crafting, I'm sure, with the private, private partners attorney would work to craft all those definitions of what they must do and what happens if they are poor behavior or poor performance and all that stuff. Furthermore, defining that it's their private capital at risk for running this facility, including all the startup capital required. One of the stark realities, again, this is a good example of why government should run it. In the feasibility study itself, even before the field's open, there's a number of employees, director of operations and marketing, support people that have to be hired months before the first game. And so there's a substantial amount of capital for all of that. And again, that needs to be defined. It's all theirs. It's not a thing they submit request for people. Also think we need a succession plan other than bad behavior or something like that when we fire somebody. What happens if I wrote down dies, incapacitated, retires, sells, whatever, moves out of the area, whatever that would be. What we need to do is a succession plan. And then I've already said this, but if the private partner would engage in nefarious or illegal activity, the private partner, public-private partnership agreement can be terminated. And then item 7, mentioned this before, it is not to put any pressure on anybody, it's just a fact. So Mammoth, who is the presumed designer and part investor, I think, maybe in all of this, on the fields. That's a national company, they've got other projects in the works that they are wanting to commit to. So there's really not a guarantee, honestly, until we can get to a point of commitment. Frankly, until we get down further, even if we do get to it, with USDA and get something locked in. I just don't want to see I hate to see us get to the point where it's because we waited too long, now they can't do it for 2 or 3 or something. I think everything changes and then we just shelve it. So again, that's not intended to put pressure on anybody, but there is a real time of the essence element.
I think we on board understand.
Yeah, not to mention, that's the sooner we build it, the sooner we get it done, I think the thing. So anyway, that's the outline. That's how I saw it. A lot of this is my 2 a.m. sweats thinking, what I don't think of. So none of that's etched in stone. I may be off my walk, which thought of. Obviously, open to suggestions or visions or clarifications.
Mike, I think this is quite an opportunity that being considered between both of them. Time is right, and I see this as a great thing, not only for the city, but for the county. I have to say, we are blessed in Williamson County with the infrastructure that we have. And being one of the few counties in the state of Illinois that is actually growing in the state, that it's actually losing population. Growing, it's through that element of growth. Not only Marion, but many other community municipalities in this county. You touched on a couple of points that were critical to me. What's important to me is not only the startup process, but the termination process. We did on a couple of bullets, and I just wrote down what's not resurfacing part of it. A minute before you said it. We have to plan what there's another COVID. Nobody foresaw that. It affects everybody. Everybody has to stay inside. We don't know. So we'll get through all that. But I think we've got 2 good points here that work. These clean it together and work through it. I think the creation, and Ronnie discussed this a little bit, his presentation was creation of an overseas board that would oversee all the operations, all the resurfacing, all whatever needed to be taken care of this board. However, it's constructed. Some members from the city, some members from the county, some members from the private entity, and they would all oversee all these problems. So we'll move on from here.
Do you mind talking to that point a little more of how you envision the oversight?
Well, I think maybe I was part of introducing, so having a hard time defining exactly what that board would do. That's what I need some help with, maybe. So much of the effectiveness of something like that depends on who is appointed to the board. And I think some of my heartburn with that at this 5 site, first of all, I don't know that we necessarily need that in place to create these agreements and maybe even construct anything afterwards. That's when the oversight can be done. My, again, another 2 a.m. thought was, okay, so the city, I don't know how many volunteer board the county appoints. I'm not sure how that. Yeah, okay, well, city's got its fair share, and it's hard to find people that are willing to put in the time. I don't know who positions are paid larger than not. And it's tough, and it seems like it's a revolving door on some of those committees that we've got, and it's just a struggle to get people can commit, and even sometimes they do and they don't show up. And so I think a lot of that thought's got to be given. But at the end of the day, if you guys can think of what role, authority they would actually have,
I think,
I think that might help define how that's actually set up. I'm just having a hard time without knowing exactly what they'd be responsible for. It's hard. It's actually how it started to him is who would I appoint to that board or who would I recommend? Do I got to find somebody with a skill set to actually do that, and so that's what I think I'm just questioning. It.
I think maybe some of this is from just overseeing the county government
Sure.
and running this facility. I'm not sure how we're going to take it. And whether or not it's necessary. The development actually do. Also,
Well, I don't know about, I'd hate to hamstring an operator with a volunteer board.
that's what I'm concerned about. You never know about agendas.
And frankly, if they don't have a fiduciary responsibility, it's an advisory board. And I don't know how much teeth that's the problem. And if there's not any teeth to it, does it just create overhead? It's not necessary. Now, if this was a marketing or something like that, where people go fast, it might be something entirely different that we should get on. But again, what are the things, other than, for example, this process where some surprise expense comes up? My suggestion is the mayor and basically both leaders of both bodies have got to agree to it, or it's a no. The council has to agree.
Well, we have to agree to it, then we're back to all the boards. I
So,
would think there's the oversight.
but get the whole board involved with everything. That might be clumsy too. You might want to think about it. I don't know. But again, the important thing math-wise is to reserve some money for those contingencies. But so if it's not that, what would need to be
Both need to be overseen.
overseen? Yeah. And that's where I need some help with. What are the actual functions that this board would do? And I haven't given a great deal of thought to that. So you guys can be thinking about, all of you can be thinking about that if that's the way you go. As far as I don't know that I think they should necessarily, I think the expenditure part of it needs to reside with the elected officials.
Yeah.
If there's some other things you want overseen, then that may work. But, at the end of the day, we're responsible. The taxpayer appointed people aren't.
That's right.
That's how I feel. Does that make?
It may be just simply the expenditure of money.
Or maybe it's just an advisory, to keep people informed, or maybe one annual report on operations or something. So you give some thought to that.
There's some thought, we need to put some thought.
It's the public, private working with. They would fund their staff work, tournament fees, and concessions.
They need to do it.
It's not,
Want to have it.
Well, I would think that they would generate.
They do, a lot of these facilities lose money. I mean, a lot of that's lost money because of debt service too.
So taking the debt service away.
I don't know that they're extraordinarily profitable. They're probably hard to run. There's only so much you can charge for tournament. But hopefully,
I guess that does create a metric that we might be concerned with. Say it does become expensive and burdensome to run the tournaments, sort of 10, 15 years from now, we're not involved. We need language in there to keep a set number of volume of tournaments coming in, so that we know it is still generating the hotel stays that we're looking for. If we've already established it's the hotel stay that we're going to pay for it, we start to lose those, and they all end.
This might be one of the benchmarks. Second.
On the on the Starbucks. We're still required to get people outside the area to keep the Starbucks fire, right? So it's in their best interest to keep it working.
This,
Check.
this is, it's the way I put it. And this has gotten confused in the public's eye, in our council's eye. Two separate things. Star bonds, this is not a Star bonds project. It's, you wouldn't want to build these with Star bonds because in themselves, they can generate sales tax out of the whatever bag of Skittles that they're selling at the concession stand. It's not much. So you would not want to use, in the sense of Star bonds, you're relying on sales tax revenue, would be a sales tax revenue. For that was standard. That being said, hundreds of thousands of people in the course of the year feeds, not just in Star bonds, but inside of Star bond district, hotels, restaurants, Walmart, local merchants. It's a supercharger because of the additional people. Where the retail destination developments, as per its own feasibility study, are supposed to bring in certain people and certain things outside of there. These were presented all people from outside. It's a very, it's like, hey, a supercharger, turbocharger on this engine and raise the time for everybody. So, yeah, Star bonds remain viable.
They have to bring it in.
bring it in.
You've got to bring it in.
Mayor, do we have an idea of time frame of start a project to first pitch, realistic as to where we're looking at, or has that had any discussion as far as?
Yes, and we predominantly what they call me the construction time. 6 years. So full build out.
I thought 25.
Now, is that 25 with the indoor complex too, but they can go to the outdoor first and then finish up the indoor, or is that just for
I think it's
total
two
project?
separate meetings of the construction company, so my understanding was both could happen at the same time. Both could be in production at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And I believe when I asked that question, it was spring of 25. John, is that what you heard also?
Yeah, 18 months.
That's 18.
Yeah, 18 months.
If not 18 to 20.
We'll go try answering that question because we were supposed to move into City Hall last October. So stuff doesn't always go.
Well, that might be a little more complicated than.
It's very much more complicated. If you understand my point, is it? I
Yeah,
kind of let it.
and we're speaking for somebody that's not here also.
So, was there another part to that question?
Sorry, that was the part. I mean, there's been mentioned with the board as far as benchmarks, and so timelines, I deem are benchmarks as well, as far as road construction, when you can anticipate shovels in the ground for a new hotel and all the other things that are part of a different project as far as the star bonds, but I know are necessitated, or I guess not necessitated, are instigated with the building of those fields. So,
I would assume that 18 to 24 months would start after 3, 4, 5 months. To see if you're getting the loan. So we could be looking at today's number.
Well, they could start with the private development could fund the first couple of months. All the cities get.
Yeah,
Well-
there's already action out there
Yes, there is.
One of
in the
the
last 2 days.
One of the things that USDA actually brought up is I think we'll have, it doesn't take $35 million to start day one. So he said a lot of, I'm not even suggesting you do this, I'm just saying there's other options out there. If we needed to borrow $1 million or $2 million to get started, once we have an idea, that it was going to get approved through USDA, we can pay that off with the USDA. So in theory, you don't have to wait for, because even after the 4-month period with USDA, it takes some time to close. So, I don't know, I don't know that it's necessarily adding 4 months onto that to your point, but it could be. Just depends on what we're doing.
And it'll be utilizing local trades as well, so.
Yes.
it's an economic boost. Multiple.
Adding a layer to the timeline. Fair to assume the county would write at least one annual check, possibly two before we even see volumes. And more importantly, hotels.
I don't think so, Jim, because, I mean, I have to really parse this a little bit. Let's say it's 6 months before we actually take a loan disbursement. I think those payments are twice annually. Is that what they said, or is it with USDA? So I'm going to determine that. In theory, most bonds are biannually, so it might be 12 months before we needed a bond payment. If it took, right? So it might take 12 months before we need from the minutes too. You know, on the capital improvement fund side, the quicker we put that in there, start preserving the funds that go off of this. But we really have to parse some of those dates to answer that question. Sure, it's a good question. The USDA will be closing the first day. So
So what is the timeline changing hotel tax from the city?
well, I think we need to work through the process a little bit and make sure everybody's on board with that first before we go irretrievably changing things. That would be my suggestion. If we get hung up on something else, then there's no need to change that.
I'd put it in the intergovernmental thing.
It's going to be.
And then you guys can pass your ordinances, but that way we've got the terms defined, so it's part of this deal, so that way,
So same question.
yeah, so whenever the IGA gets done, I think it's gonna be.
So as soon as we can get, well, and the P3 agreement needs to be executed and everybody agree on that too.
Correct.
So, but it's no more than ordinance change and we're more of an issue with the county. We
It's a
have
little
to change our reporting forms and things with the.
Yeah.
Our
It's a little
reporting,
bit.
our reporting form, I don't change. So maybe some logistics there, do, but that's on your side. Oh, fancy. Can you change it very quick?
With the ordinance or company, yeah, with the change in.
So I don't know what form this takes, if any, at this point. Do we vote on or just sort of give a nod to the attorneys to
start working.
start forming this? And then obviously there's no decision making per
There's no
se
decision.
until we get to that. Is there enough will to go down that path? Or-
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But let's start them working when we were done.
And then I promise I will continue to work on this math model, which once you get it, please have somebody else triple check on it. It is just math. Like,
We want to set another time meeting. And that between here.
We're going on vacations. That's our limitation.
Couple of weeks.
These guys are the ones that got the time restrictions.
I don't know what vacation is, so I'm good.
That's quick.
Well, if we can get something put together.
There's got to be some templates, some, maybe, maybe not, maybe this is a unique creature. Looks like you've got other things on your agenda to cover today. Do you want us to adjourn our meeting and get out of your hair? Do you want us to stay? What do you want
I
us
think
to-
this is, did you guys have anything else? What was that, Rick?
We addressed the miscellaneous this morning.
Yeah, we had most miscellaneous this morning. You guys had any other?
I-
All right, did we get accomplished what you needed to accomplish?
I think so. I just, a lot of detail to work through, obviously, but if it doesn't make sense, there was no point in having work on something that we didn't even have a conceptual.
And each of us, each board now work our details and issues through our accounts.
Yeah, I think what I had suggested is the county chair and mayor be involved in those discussions. You know,
Just like we did this morning.
yeah, you know, just trying, this is clumsy because we can't all talk together. You guys can't all talk together. There's gotta be a pivot point somewhere in there where we refine this, and then obviously the boards, plural, will have to approve whatever is finalized, but I suspect there'll be a lot of give and take and stuff before that.
The only thing we need to offer before closure on this joint meeting is public comment,
Oh, yeah.
because it is an official meeting, so.
So is there anyone in the public that'd like to make a comment? To watching, right here? Hearing none,
Second.
roll call please.
Ken Anderson.
Yeah.
Jim Marlowe.
Yeah.
Jim Anderson.
Yay.
Close executive session here, but that's, I don't have a need for one. Do